In this unit, we'll be discussing the Bool data type. We'll be looking at the logical operators. We will discuss the membership operator. We will look at some mistakes that tend to happen when we're dealing with Boolean operators and Boolean values. And then after we have learned the concepts with Bool, we'll simply put them together to write a complete program. Finally, we're going to have some problems, some exercises where you will test your learning. Great, let's begin. So, whenever we're learning anything new, any new concept, it makes sense to use the interpreter so that we can experiment. Now, we've learned about the int data type. We've learned about the float data type. Let's now learn about the bool data type. Now, bool might sound like a foreign name, a strange name, but the idea behind it and what it actually means is something you are already familiar with in your day-to-day life. So, a bool, okay, simply is the type that we use to refer to when something is true or when something is false. Okay, so a bool can only be either true or false. It cannot be anything else. All right, so let's start off by creating a variable, and let's call this variable um, will go to lunch. Okay, and we're gonna assign the bool value or the value true. Okay, now one thing to keep in mind, whenever we write true, it has to be a capital T. Okay, so if I say what is the type of will go to lunch, we see that Python returns to us that it is of type bool. Okay, so bool simply means that it's a variable that can contain the value of true or false. Great. We could also change this. Let's say we can't make it to lunch, so we're gonna say capital F false. Alright, and so when we check the type, it is still a bool. Okay, and by the way, bool is short for boolean. Okay, it's short for boolean. Alright, so what can we do with these bool types? Well, we will use these bool types to make decisions in our code. Okay, so whenever we see the Boolean types, we tend to see the logical operators. And so I mean that you tend to see and, you tend to see and you tend to see not. So these three Boolean or logical operators are used in combination with these bool types. Okay, so let's say that I go to the shop and while I'm there I get a phone call and you ask me if I see my friend Jane there, or if I see my friend Tom there, that I should give them $5 each. Alright, so notice I have the in that statement. Okay, So if I create a variable and I say seeing Jane, alright, and let's say I do see Jane, and let's say I have seen Tom and I have not seen Tom. Okay, so I want to find out what is seeing Jane or seeing Tom. Okay, and notice it returns a true value. Okay, so let's save that. Let's say result is seeing Jane or seeing Tom. And if I ask Python to give me the type of result, we see that it's of type bool. Now, why is it that Python gave me true instead of false? Well, it turns out that when you have a Boolean statement on the left hand side and you have a Boolean statement on the right hand side and they are connected by then Python will evaluate each of them independently and then it will apply the logical operator to the results. So in reality, this is what Python is doing. Since I saw Jane, Python knows that that is true. And since I did not see Tom, Python knows that that is false. And so Python will simply say true or false. Now, the rule for logical operators says that if I have a true statement and I have a false statement, the ORing of them will always be true. Okay? So it's just one of those rules that you must always remember. A true statement or a false statement will be a true result. Okay? So let's quickly look at the other combinations. If I have some statement that when I execute it, it returns true, and I have another statement where when I execute it, it also returns true, then Python will return true. Now the other combination I could have is I have a false statement, I have a true statement, and they're ORed, and once again Python will return true. Okay. Whenever we're ORing statements, Python will only return false if the statements are all false. Okay? If they're all false, Python will return false. And it's important that you understand what I mean when I say all of them must be false. Okay? Because if I have some statement that returns false, or I have another statement that returns false, and then finally I have another statement that returns true, well, this will return true because I have one statement that is true. Okay? Great. So this is how we use the OR operator. Let's look at how we use the AND operator. Okay? So the rules for the AND operator differ slightly than the OR. So if I have a false statement and that is ANDed with another false statement, then the result is a false. Okay? If I have a false statement ANDed with a true statement, then the result is a false. Okay? Remember, when we were doing an OR, it would have been true. But with an AND, it's a false. So if we take a true statement and we AND it with a false statement, the result is, of course, a false statement. So the other combination that we're left with is if you have a true statement and a true statement, the result will be a true statement. So only if all the statements are true and you AND them, do you get a true result. And so that means that if I have a true statement and a true statement and a false statement, then the result has to be a false. Okay, so it doesn't matter if you have 99 true statements and one false statement. If they're ANDed, the result will be false. Okay, so what does the NOT operator do? Well, it's very straightforward. It negates the result of a Boolean result. So, if I have the previous example, a true and a true and a false, if I put in parentheses, and it's always wise to put parentheses just to show what you're doing. If I say not, okay, what Python will do, it will evaluate this one inside the parenthesis, which we know is false. And then since this is false, what is not false? Well, if I have false, well then the opposite or the complement or the inverse of false is true. Okay? So in other words, if I'm not true, I get false. And if I'm not false, I get true. Alright? So these are the three logical / Boolean operators that you should be comfortable with. And the good thing is the rules that I just went over, the rules we just discussed, they apply equally well to other programming languages. Okay, so the concept is rather simple. So let's look at one final example. Let's say I have true, okay, and I have false, okay. And then I have and then I have not, and then I have false or true. Okay. So what would the result of this be? Well, the process is straightforward. You always work inside the parenthesis. Okay. So if you think about it, a true and a false has to be a false, and a not false is a true. Now what about this side? What is false or true? Well, we know that once there's a true on your ORing, it has to be a true. So what is not true? Well, it's false. So finally we have false and false, which we know is false. Okay? Great. So let's leave it here. And in the next video, we will continue our discussion on the Bool data type. We will look at doing comparisons between variables, between numbers, between strings, and see how everything that we compare always results in a Boolean type. I'll see you then.